Believe we are a go.
All right. Welcome to meeting number 5 of our AI task force. Just a little bit of the housekeeping to start. Task force members and technical advisors should be showing up as panelists in the Zoom. If you aren't, please get in touch with Scott or Dan, who can promote you. The meeting is being recorded. You can access recordings of prior meetings on the AI Task Force website via the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future. And finally, I want to welcome our newest member, Representative Matthew McIntyre. Representative McIntyre represents House District 18 and will be replacing Representative Carlo on our task force. So welcome. Do we have Representative McIntyre with us?
Hello, I am here.
Fantastic. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great. So today we're going to build on last month's conversation about the workforce to cover a major AI theme, and that's education. What I think we'll hear is that for folks on the front lines of our education system, AI isn't something off in the future. It's in the classroom right now. It's certainly in my household, and we've had many conversations with my school-age students about it. And as you may have seen, the timing of this conversation is quite interesting with the recent announcement of the federal executive order around AI and education. So this is a space to watch as subsequent plans get formulated in Washington. For us here in Maine, we'll start today's discussion hearing directly from 3 educators in the state. Beth Lambert from Maine's Department of Education will facilitate a panel about how these folks are integrating AI into their pedagogy and trying to better understand the ways that AI might be changing the skills that their students will need to succeed in the future workplace. And then second on our agenda, we'll welcome 2 national experts on AI and education to broaden our aperture to the opportunities, challenges, and practical realities of AI being grappled with by schools and universities everywhere. We're joined by Kate Moore, a research scientist at MIT's Scheller Teacher Education Program, and Ulrich Boser, who leads the Learning Agency, an education research and innovation advisory group that's been closely tracking the fast evolving landscape of education-focused AI tools. And then Task Force Technical Advisor Ruth Kermish-Allen from the Maine Mathematics and Science Alliance will facilitate this dialogue. Then we'll take a short break and return for discussion, both to reflect on these presentations and also to affirm the right questions that our education subgroup will be tackling. And before we get started, I will wrap up my welcome with a few quick updates from other task force business. So we're excited to preview that we are hoping to make our next meeting our first opportunity to meet in person, which I'm really looking forward to. There will also be a Zoom option for those unable to join us in person. Our meeting is scheduled for 2 to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, June 4th. Before the meeting from 1 to 2 p.m. on that day, Dan has also offered a chance. Oh, I missed this part. Dan Negrin from Maine Health has offered to host us in Portland. I'm bearing the lead, which is going to be super exciting. And Dan has also offered a chance for any interested task force members to visit their facility and see some of the AI applications being explored. And so more on this to come from our staff members. Second, I'd like to remind you that the meeting originally planned for June 27th will now take place on Wednesday, June 25th from 12 to 2. And so reach out to Dan or Scott if you need to be resent the new invite. And last, I wanted to highlight that the GOPIF has launched a comments portal for collecting public input for Maine's AI task force. Comments will be accepted through mid-June. Task force members are welcome to circulate the link to anyone interested in sharing their perspective. The link is in your background memo, and we'll go ahead and put it in the chat right now as well, so that you can access that and circulate it to who needs to get it from your side. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to turn it over to Beth to get us started for today.
Great.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Lambert, and I'm the Chief Teaching and Learning Officer at the Maine Department of Education. Among other responsibilities I have here, I get the pleasure of overseeing the team that helps schools explore and integrate new and emerging technologies, including, of course, AI. One part of our work, the AI toolkit for schools, was highlighted in your background reading for this meeting today. Joining us to kick off today's task force discussion on AI and education are two classroom teachers and one principal from three very different school districts across our lovely state of Maine. We have just 30 minutes for this discussion, and as you all can probably guess, this is a very busy time of year for each of our educators and principal as we quickly approach the end of the school year and summer. So I'm hoping that we'll wrap up in time, though, for the task force to ask a few questions in the time allotted. So welcome, Julie, Kate, and Mike. I'm just going to start off by asking you each to introduce yourselves. Tell us your name, your school, your role. We'll start with you, Julie, then go Kate, and then Mike.
Awesome. I'm Julie York. I'm teaching over in South Portland High School in South Portland, and I am the Career Prep and Technology Department Chair, and I teach computer science and media electives here at the high school.
I'm Kate Meyer. I teach English and Design Thinking at Mount Desert Island High School in Bar Harbor. And my role is shifting into an instructional innovation coach. So I'll still teach a little English and I'll get to work with educators.
I'm Mike Muir. I'm the principal of East Grand School in Danforth, Maine. We're a tiny pre-K through 12 school in the middle of nowhere.
Great. Well, so glad to have all three of you here representing our amazingly beautiful and diverse state. Julie, can you take us into your classroom in South Portland and talk to us about how AI is showing up in how you teach, and how have discussions about AI evolved in your school?
Sure. So in my classroom, I use AI. I use it as a teacher. I use different tools to help me prepare for classes, to differentiate instruction, to help me, figure out better ways or different ways to approach problems in my lesson planning. So I'm using AI as a professional, and my students are using AI for various different purposes. So I have students that are using AI, for example, in videos where they don't feel comfortable speaking, they're using AI to speak for them. I have students that are using AI to kind of help generate ideas before they begin big design projects. I have students that are using different AI tools to kind of gain different perspectives and to, you know, creatively think and tackle problems. So, like, I have a student who's working on a program right now, and he's learning his fourth programming language. And so, as he's learning Python, he's using AI as kind of like a coding assistant to kind of teach him Python so that while I'm working with another student, he can continue to progress. So, AI is definitely in my classroom. And I think the last part of your question was how I've seen it develop. And
And evolve, yeah, change over time from sort of it's all about cheating or not cheating to really an educational tool.
sure. And so I think it's definitely evolved in the sense that it's here and students are using it and we're using it, and we're starting to talk about how our school will handle it and what are the policies of South Portland High School and what every teacher's kind of expectation is. I lean towards the side of wanting my students to use the tool. I want access for all of my students to use the tool. I think it's extremely useful for students to kind of help themselves through processes that they struggle with. So I lean towards letting students use tools, but not all teachers are. So I think there's a real, like, now we're kind of discussing as teachers as a policy in the building. And it's evolved from cheating to, maybe we need to teach the students how to use the tool, and how do we teach them how to use the tool, and what does that look like in, different settings, and kind of what is our responsibility as a teacher? What PD do we need as teachers to make sure that we're communicating clearly with our students who are definitely using AI. So we definitely need to like get behind it, and best teaching practices, know how to use the tool ourselves. So I think that's what I would give you as an answer.
Great. It's exciting to hear how not only students who are excited and using it on the computer science side of things, but also as ways of differentiating and having students share their learning and their with you in ways to remove the barriers that were keeping them from doing that. It's great to hear. So Kate, I'll turn it over to you. Very similar question. Take us into your classroom in MDI. How's AI showing up in how you teach? And also talk about what's happening outside of the classroom that's informing this work for you.
Right. Like Julie, I use AI a lot as a thought partner and for collaboration. So for example, this year, I created a new English class. It's a true crime class. And so I started with AI. I had some ideas, but I went to AI and really collaborated there almost as my own private instructional coach to develop this class. And as I have issues or I have new innovations that I want to include, I go back, to that tool to do that. So I use it a lot as really a thinking partner. Our district also is a BRISC district, and that is a platform for educators. And that allows us to create really quickly and easily with AI, but also to use AI to give feedback. And so that's been an interesting conversation as well. How much do we lean on AI to do that? What do our students think about that? What does that allow us to do? So that's been a great conversation. Outside of the classroom, I do lead the district AI group, which is made up of district administrators, library media specialists from around the district. We have some professors from COA who join us. We have business members from the community who join us, the tech integrators in the district, and we are working together as a group to figure out how we want to implement AI in the district in a way that is really creative and innovative, but also cautious, recognizing that, AI is a tool that is here, but that it also really represents a cultural shift that has, really far-reaching implications for how we learn and how we teach. And so what is that going to mean? How are we going to do that responsibly? We all agree that it needs to be done, that this is going to be a way in the future, but how are we going to do that so that everybody is on board and feels safe and feels like they're part of that process?
Well, it's exciting. Can you just say a little bit more about what you mean by using AI to provide feedback and what that looks like?
Yes, I would say one of my biggest challenges, I've been teaching English for 25 years. And so one of my biggest challenges is to give timely, formative feedback on my students' writing, because really in my classroom, my students should be writing even more than I can read, but I still need to be giving a lot of feedback on that. So one of the things this tool allows me to do is to read a student's essay and then to use AI to generate targeted feedback based on my rubrics, based on what I ask it to give the students feedback on. And then it will generate the feedback in the Google Doc for the students so the students can see it. I can edit it. I can make it, whatever I want it to be. So sometimes it's incorrect, right? And I correct it or I delete it. And sometimes it's spot on and I leave it. But it gives students immediate feedback so that they continue on in their process while I work with others. And so it just allows everybody to have more feedback faster than I could ever give.
That's exciting, and I can only imagine how much it takes that load off of that feeling like you're always behind on giving feedback. So great. All right, Mike, so here we go. Take us into your office at East Grand. As you said, small rural school. How's AI helping you run that building, and how's it showing up in the classrooms in your school?
So we're a one-to-one school all through all the grades. We've, thanks to MLTI and Network Maine, have high excuse me, it is allergy season. Thanks to Network Maine and MLTI, we do have high-speed internet in the school, but also through the state initiatives, we're starting to get high-speed internet in our homes. But it does mean that our kids and teachers are a little farther behind in terms of what they're thinking to do with technology. So we started this year with an introductory workshop. We brought one of the support people from the DOE. Nicole, she did a great workshop, gave our teachers some ideas about what's possible. But our teachers hadn't even started thinking about cheating yet. Part of what got me more and more into AI, the newer AI, was a educator in the Midwest, Steve Denbo, did an experiment where he divided up his middle school kids into 4 different groups, and no one knew which group they were in. I mean, other students didn't know which group they were in. One group had to write their own essay. One group had ChatGPT write the essay. One group had ChatGPT write the essay, and then they revised it. And then the 4th group wrote their own essay and had ChatGPT provide feedback and revise it. Then they read each other's essays and tried to guess which group each was in. They also had a conversation about what seemed most effective. And what they decided was the essays they thought were the best were the ones that the students wrote, and ChatGPT helped firm up. And this reinforces the idea that both Julie and Kate have talked about using AI as a assistant, as a partner in your work. I had a colleague suggest to me that I get a subscription to ChatGPT, and I trained a bot to be, for lack of a better term, I apologize, mini-me. And I fed it all of my blog posts. I have years of articles I've written. And I fed it lots of information about the school. And now it can help me draft things with my voice and with the background of the school. And so I always take whatever's drafted and make it my own. But it gets me much closer than even a regular ChatGPT draft would with that extra work. Some of our teachers are trying different things. Some of our teachers' kids are trying different things. One of our teachers' daughters is in high school in a nearby district. She'll do her own worksheet and then take a picture of it and drop it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will correct it for her. And the really nice thing about that is that it will explain at the end the one she got wrong about what the right answer is and why. And so she's also using it as an assistant. She's using it to support. I have some hopes for ChatGPT helping me with things like, how do I build a middle school schedule with a limited number of lunches and exploratories, and adding 1 grade to the middle grades. And I have the same question about the elementary school. How will we build an effective schedule? So, and I'm starting to explore ideas around how it can help me with teacher observations and evaluation. I try to script the observations that I have, mostly as a reminder to me to what I saw. And I would drop that into ChatGPT and ask it to write a summary for me. I haven't been happy with the results yet, which I think has more to do with my scripting and having not yet provided it with a good rubric. But these are the ways I'm starting to explore how an electronic digital assistant can help a new principal, I'm not young, a new principal with the kind of chaotic, busy tasks that a principal has, save some time, add some accuracy, and give us some better supports.
That's great. If we can save time with scheduling, remember from my years as a building administrator, how many hours or weeks we'd get back as administrators. So that's one of them. So let's move into this next round. Julie, I know there's been some previous conversations that you and I have had that you've been using AI to engage with multilingual learners, and something that's definitely come up in this task force discussion in different ways. Can you just tell us a bit about that work?
Sure, absolutely. So in my classroom, I have every type of student. So I have multilingual students, and there's a large population in South Portland of multilingual students. And so I find that and I'll preface this by saying everything that helps them helps every other student. So when I do something that helps a multilingual student, I'm helping like an honors kid, I'm helping a life skills kid, I'm helping everyone. So what AI has done with my multilingual students is it's helped remove a barrier of not understanding each other. So if used correctly, and I preface that by saying I have to teach how to use it correctly, but if it's used correctly, it's really helped my students when I give an instruction, they can check it. We use Magic School, and Magic School has a bunch of tools. It uses a chatbot called Raina, and I have also used Goblin tools. It can help them like break down the instruction and get it re-explained in a manner that makes more sense for them. So it's been really helpful to the students that want to do the thing but are struggling with the communication barrier. And it's also really helped when I'm making instructions, I can feed it through myself and I can say, this is what I want to do. And I'm explaining it to a diverse group of students. Is there a better way for me to explain this? Is there an easier way to say this that would be, easier to translate into other languages? Because there are certain words I use, like assignments doesn't translate very easily into other languages. So, and so if I know not to use the word assignments and instead use a word that translates more easily, then when they use whatever translation software they're using on their iPad or on their computer, it comes across as making a little bit more sense. So I've had some really good luck with that. And I've had some with the students that are engaged and understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's really helped me almost be another person to explain what I'm trying to do. Because I have classes of about 26 on average. So when there's only one of me and 26 students, having someone else in there to help me has been awesome.
That's great. Allowing students to access content that is at their engagement level, and not at a much lower level, just to access the language is a great opportunity for them. So thanks. Kate, what are you seeing from your students about how AI is influencing their career aspirations? Are there differences that you're seeing in your students more versus less exposed, those that are more exposed to AI versus those that are less exposed?
That's really interesting because I don't think my students are yet thinking about that. I think we are still at the point, we're moving beyond the point where my students are coming to me and saying, we don't really want to use it because we hear it's just used for cheating, which is where we were last year. And there is still some of that feeling. They're like, oh, we're going to use AI. That's weird because all of our teachers, our other teachers have said, absolutely not. It's just cheating. So we're moving a little bit past that. I don't think they're convinced that it's going to show up in their careers, actually. I don't think we are at that point. Right now, my current students are most concerned about the impact of AI on the environment. That is the conversation that seems to be really big. And so that's been an interesting shift. That didn't come up at all last year. And this year, that is when I said, oh, we're going to use AI for this, it came up pretty quickly, like, wait a minute, let's talk about the environment. And so I did. I taught them about AI's impact on the environment and then tied that into my ethical prompting framework. And I myself had never made that connection, but it was an interesting connection that they kind of required me to make, which was convince me that I should even be using AI when it has this impact on the environment. So we talked about how to write the most concise prompts to get the best answers the quickest so that we are having the least environmental impact. And so now every time I'm asking them to use it, they're thinking, they're stopping, they're doing what we want them to do and think, should I be using AI for this tool? And they're calling each other out on that. So someone used AI the other day and someone said, that's an unethical use. And so they're having that conversation. I think, the industry is going to come next, but right now they're kind of working their way through those ethical concerns that they're having.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. Mike, as you hire incoming teachers, are there new skills related to AI that are increasingly important to you to look for?
I unfortunately we're not there yet. We're also a very isolated district, and so our looking for teachers, we're very happy when someone applies. We've had issues before, but what I will say about that is because we're a staff that's just learning, I think a piece of what we need is good professional development like we had before. I think we're stuck with our assumptions about AI unless someone shows us some good examples. And so our workshop showed us some, it was a mile a minute and 100 different examples, but my teachers now feel like it might be something they would use. I think they need, I asked ChatGPT, what advice should I give the task force in terms of the future of AI? And it did talk about building AI into the curriculum. It also talked about professional development. And I think our teachers need some good examples of how to use it. Kate's classroom is a really good, the kinds of things she's built around conversations of ethical use and appropriate use with kids. If my teachers could start to see that, they might start doing it more. And I think that's important. I also think that that one of the pieces of advice from ChatGPT was that we establish some pilot programs and some local innovation. And the piece I was thinking before I even asked ChatGPT for its advice was, we just need good models. I used to work with a guy who said, we want to show them what they could do if they only knew they could do it. And I think that's what teachers need right now with AI. And then as teachers start seeing what they could do with AI, administrators would start knowing what to look for with AI. And I think our interview process would evolve to a point where one of our questions is not just how do you use technology, but how do you use AI to enhance your teaching and to enhance student learning.
That's great. Thanks. And we certainly know when teachers start using it and then they'll start teaching each other. And that is our best force here in Maine for bringing about innovation and change and implementation. So thank you all. Well, I think we have some time to open up for 1 or 2 questions from the task force. So you can raise your virtual hand and I will call on folks. Hannah.
Great. Well, thank you all. It's thank you for what you all do, and thank you for being here today. I'm wondering, I mean, this is a task force sort of grappling with the state's role in supporting, managing, regulating AI for all kinds of parts of our economy and education system. Is there something that, I mean, I think the Department of Education is doing a good job thinking about how to help navigate this, but is there more that when you think about the state's role and your school district, I mean, do you have any advice for us or sort of requests of things that in the coming years you hope the state can help to do to sort of help you navigate this?
If I can tackle this first, I would like to reinforce what I was saying about, I think, developing some good opportunities for pilot programs and local innovation so that we can explore what's possible. And then once we've explored and then put our minds together around things like what Kate was talking about, applying the what's possible to an ethical lens so that we could develop some clear guidelines and guardrails. I worry about guidelines and guardrails being developed before we have a clear picture of what's possible and ethical. But I think the two can go hand in hand. Help us explore what's possible and help us figure out what that tells us about what kinds of guidelines we should give schools.
I'd like to throw in supporting teachers talking to each other and sharing. Because Mike had mentioned Kate, and I've heard from Kate before, and I've spoken with Beth and Nicole in the state, and I think that one of the best tools that we can have too is having teachers support other teachers. So like as a state, if there's time for us given to talk with other teachers, if there's ways to meet with other teachers and to see what's going well and to talk about what works where and get that exposure to what other people are doing, that's been very powerful for my own practices. Being exposed, what's going on in the country as well as the state has really helped me do better in my own classroom. So I would say, at a state perspective, we're not alone. Like Maine isn't alone. All the other states are, I'm sure you're all talking to other states too. And I'm sure you're looking at what other states are doing. But that idea of seeing what others are doing and
And I would love to see more support. Beth's question really leads to this, more support with connections to other industries outside of education and how they're using AI. It's so interesting to talk to educators. I gave a workshop this morning to educators about prompting, and I just heard a little side conversation about, oh, I could never have it help me with a lesson plan because that's cheating. And I think educators especially still have it in their head that even for our own professional use, it's somehow cheating to be using this tool. And then when I talk to people from other industries, they're like, no, we're all using AI. Here are the ways we're doing it. It's amazing. And it's, it's really innovative. And so just like helping forge those connections would be really helpful, I think.
I'm gonna try and get at least another question in, maybe two. Dan?
Yeah, thanks to all of you. That was really fantastic overview. I loved hearing about how you're all using it in your settings. I guess just a comment and then a quick question. The comment is what I loved hearing about is that all of you, whether for your peers or for your students, you're trying to establish that these are tools as adjuncts, that they're not substitutes. And I think that's a really critical component. Julie, you were talking about teaching your student a programming language and just understanding that these things can't be a substitute. You still have to know how to program in that language because these things make mistakes. So that was fantastic. My question, which Kate, maybe you just touched on, is are you actually getting to the point where, again, with either your peers or your students, you're teaching techniques around prompt engineering and sort of the best way to use the tools? Because honestly, I think that's one of the most important skill sets that we can be teaching now is yes, that these tools are available and that they can be effective in certain instances, but how to use them is almost just as important as knowing that they're there.
I'd like to chime in on that one because I realized I wasn't doing a good enough job teaching how to use a tool to some of my students recently. And I think it's like, so it's just good teaching. It's just we have to just continue to do the good practices we've always done. Like if I give my students a knife and say, okay, use it, you get it, here's a knife. Obviously we're gonna have some accidents. And I think that like with AI in particular, I am getting better and better at prompting. My students are getting better and better at prompting. We're asking better questions. As Kate mentioned, do we need to even use this right now? Like, is this the tool for the job? I'm sure it's the shiny tool and it's the most talked about tool right now. But is it, I think you're absolutely right. Like you have to teach how to use it and the prompt engineering or what you're using for a tool. We're not allowed to use ChatGPT. Teachers are using it. So like all the teachers have ChatGPT accounts and they're like, oh, it's so much better than Raina. And so, I always look at teachers and I'm like, so you realize kids are using it too. They might not be using it on the school account because we're using Magic School, but the kids are using ChatGPT because it's the shiniest new tool. So if we're all going to be using ChatGPT, we need to know how to use it well, ethically, safely, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna,
oh, sorry.
no, okay. Quick. I want to hear what you have to say, Kate.
Prompt engineering has become part of my curriculum. I work with older students, so we are able to use ChatGPT with parental permission. So we are in that platform together. I'm teaching them co-creation through a framework that I created called the acronym is ROBOT. And so we work through that framework to come up with the best prompts. And I teach that to educators as well. So just giving everyone a starting place to allow them to see the possibilities of AI, because I find they're not impressed with it if they're not prompting it properly.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, we've got one more, and Chris, I'm going to open up to you, and if we could just make our answers as quick as possible, just because I know you guys have to get to class, so I don't want to hold anybody up.
Really briefly, first, fascinating discussion, and kudos to all of you for the innovation and the experimentation and the work you're doing. Are you and Mike, you were transparent about your environment and given its circumstances, but Julie and Kate, are you kind of the outliers in your organizations? Are most teachers as progressively embracing this? Do you have a sense? I'm trying to look at kind of where are we on the adoption curve?
I am an outlier, but I am bringing others with me slowly.
I am definitely an outlier. There are teachers on the complete opposite side that, would never hate it, banned from the class, absolutely. And we just had a leadership team meeting. I would say probably there are three or so departments that don't want to touch it whatsoever. So I think, I think there's people like me that are jumping in, but I'll always jump in. And then there are people who are not interested.
Thank you.
Great. Well, unfortunately, I know that there's so much good energy in here. I think we would love to talk with you. And Julie, Kate, Mike, I always love talking with you and appreciate so much your time with us this afternoon. And I know you're all in the midst of school. So thank you so much for giving us the time and energy and what you're doing every day in your classrooms and your innovation. And I'll hand it over to our next panel.
Me. So thank you. Thank you so much, Julie, Kate, Mike, and Beth. Really great to hear what you're doing, and have a great rest of the school year. And those kids are lucky to have you. I'd now like to welcome Ruth, Ulrich, and Kate for our next panel around national perspectives. Ruth, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you so much, all of our fantastic educators. That was an extremely inspiring panel. And just to hear more about what you're doing is fantastic. So thank you for what you're doing. So hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Ruth Kermish-Allen. I serve as the Executive Director for the Maine Mathematics and Science Alliance, MMSA, a nonprofit based in Augusta. And we really focus on expanding access to STEM education pre-K through 12 for educators and their students, both in the classroom and out. And so we've been researching, evaluating, and designing a series of different opportunities to really help educators understand computer science, STEM, and specifically AI. What is it? How can they become curious about it? And how can they begin thinking about how different components of AI could fit into their classroom? All the kind of work that you just heard about today. So I get the fantastic opportunity to introduce two national leaders to our panel today. First off is Kate Moore, a research scientist at MIT Scheller Teacher Education Program, who I've had the pleasure of working with. Hello, Kate. And I also get the opportunity to introduce Ulrich Boser, who leads the Learning Agency. So what we're going to do now is just have a little bit of an opportunity to dive into what is the kind of research and kind of boundary pushing work that each of our guests are having to do and have the opportunity to do. How could that potentially relate to Maine and the kinds of contexts that we just heard about thanks to our teacher panel, and explore those opportunities. So first question is if I could just ask both of you, Kate and Ulrich, to introduce yourselves and what kind of work is your organization doing related to AI? So I'll pass to you first, Kate.
Oh, thank you so much, Ruth. It's so good to see you. And thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak. It's certainly a privilege to be able to do this. And it's very flattering to call me a national AI expert. That's wonderful. I am an early career researcher at the MIT STEP Lab. STEP stands for Scheller Teacher Education Program. I have been working on the Everyday AI project with Irene Lee and Dr. Helen Zhang at Boston College. Everyday AI is, you can look it up, everyday-ai.org is a National Science Foundation funded research project that looked closely at how to help teachers advance their own AI literacy and learn how to teach their middle school age youth in diverse and inclusive classrooms how AI works. Before joining this project, I got my PhD at Teachers College, Columbia University, where I studied collaborative problem solving, and I taught as a teaching assistant natural language processing machine learning at the School of Public Affairs at Columbia. And before that, I was a professional development coach for teachers across the city of New York. And before that, I worked as a decade as a special education science teacher in New York and in Newark and Pittsburgh. So it's a pleasure to be here. That's a long background for me, but I just want to center that I'm a researcher and educator. And I think I'll pass it to Ulrich to introduce himself.
Thanks so much. Honored to join you. I run the Learning Agency. We're an organization devoted to promoting educational innovation. In AI, we have a number of programs. We run a grant program that is essentially the world's largest ed tech competition. It's heavily focused on AI forward organizations. And then our organization also does development of AI tools as well. We've created the largest database of student essays to help train natural language processing models. And we also do some policy work in this space as well. And again, really honored to join you here today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so for the task force, we've just heard some fantastic examples of what is currently happening across Maine's classrooms. And thankfully, that is a wonderful example of what's happening. And that is just one little sample. There's many, many, many different examples of what is happening across Maine's classrooms. And so what we're going to try to do now is think about not what is currently happening, but what are the potentials? What are the future opportunities that that Maine educators, that Maine's educational landscape could perhaps take advantage of? And within some of the Maine Math and Science Alliance's partnerships already with AI Every Day, we're going to be welcoming a new cohort of educators to join AI Every Day during the Computer Science Summer of Fun Professional Learning this summer. So we've already got a lot of these things in the works, but let's really think almost future build in this conversation next. So I'm going to go to you first, Ulrich, to really take a deep dive of there's so much energy right now in AI education nationally. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of concern, as we heard from our educator panelists. So, but you have the opportunity of really thinking about the innovation space, not necessarily worrying about the barriers for implementation, but more so really thinking about what are those opportunities? If the sky's the limit, what could potentially be possible with AI? So as thinking about that from that innovation space, what's actually new and important to focus on? And what's just hype? What does the task force really need to be focusing on?
It's a great question, and it's a really hard question. A couple of things that, I would say at a high level, particularly with a nod towards policy, and that it is going to be very hard to create AI policy. Within the AI community, people often joke that, if you want to bore people, you call it statistics. And if you want to worry people, you call it AI. And so when we think about that from a policy perspective, right? One, it's interesting, the panelists previously were brilliant, but I think it ignores the fact that all of us are using AI every day. If you use Google Maps to get somewhere, that is a giant AI program, right? It's making predictions. In education, so many people are using Duolingo. You kind of think of it as a game, but really a giant AI company. So a lot of these things are things that people are already using, and policy then should be very focused in my mind on sort of the specific use case, right? And sort of like, if you think about like chemistry policy, right? Like that's going to be very hard to do, but like nitrates, they're dangerous for bombs, you need them for fertilizer, right? It's going to make much more sense if you focus on things, very narrowly that have a use case. Ruth, you asked me though a question that I haven't fully answered is, what is the future of this? There are things that I feel safe in predicting and that I think lead to some important policy considerations. And that is kids are going to use ChatGPT to cheat. And when we say cheating, I mean really writing the entire essay or just, saying, what were the causes of the American Revolution? And I think, there's an important policy solution to that, and that is we're going to be moving, certainly in the short term, to more live assessments. Our organization now, we've gotten so many ChatGPT generated resumes, just ask people to do a live Zoom call. They record it and submit it in. More and more teachers, I think, are going to go in this direction. So as a state, what are some live assessment tools that you can use, right? Kids submitting, getting a question live, then submitting a video. There's lots of, I think, ways to think through that. And then, the bigger question to answer you is, in the next 5 years or so, and I think after that, I really don't want to do any predictions without, making stuff up, is the natural language processing, really these text-based chatbots are going to continue to really grow. They're going to become more and more sophisticated, even week by week. If you use ChatGPT, it changes. And then what the fancy word for multimodal or using kind of voice and images, I think are also going to grow within that time. So having more kind of live avatars and those types of things will really be important. So what does that mean for education? You know, having a teacher sort of basically a real life or you know, AI generated Sol Khan for every student based really on their interests, you know, I think is something that we would see right around the corner.
Great, thank you for that. Another follow-up question to that. So the Learning Agency almost operates like a shark tank for AI in education. You see a lot of things come across your desk. You're running grant programs that really let you see hundreds of different AI applications that some of which that you were just speaking to. What are the opportunities and applications that are getting you most excited? So what's really rising to the top in your mind of what kinds of innovations you're seeing in AI for education?
Sure. So I think in the, you know, very short term or the things that we're seeing now, we're seeing tremendous evidence that for math learning, for instance, that using AI, particularly for students who are mildly motivated or, you know, at least showing some interest can be really, really helpful. So what does that look like? It is, you know, they're struggling on a problem. What is the next best video for them to watch? You know, who are students who are going to be fine, you know, using a con for a couple of hours? And then, you know, trying to figure out what are students who might need more support. Another nice AI tool that is, I think, you know, quite helpful is we know early teachers, they talk too much. They're a little bit like me in this conversation, just, you know, excited about what they have to say. And so one thing you can do is just record an interaction and I have a pie chart afterwards. And it's like your students did not talk enough, right? Of the classroom time, you were 70%, students are off, only talking 30%. You should be, what good teachers do is around 50%. So allow that. So I think those are some, I think, interesting things to surface. And I think there's a key state role in identifying, because AI is so embedded within programs, showing programs that have been effective. You know, assessments is one that run a large scale RCT in Maine. Happy to talk about it. It was very positive, very AI forward. So, you know, how are we identifying programs that really work? And then when I think, you know, 5 years out, I think there's a lot of potential around automated speech recognition, basically Siri. But for younger kids around reading right now, that type of technology, you know, it's sometimes shaky even with adults, as we often know. But for kids, it's really very weak, in part because kids have those cute little lisps. They dip into accents. Their vocabulary isn't as developed. But there's really, when you think about, oh, we could do a lot of early stage assessments, a lot of early stage involvement for kids around that type of kind of speech recognition or Siri meets early learning.
Great, thank you so much. And then, you know, with all of those potential tools, the question really becomes, how do we also honor the role of the educator and build off of the supports of the AI tools so that the educators can really leverage the practice that they have in addition to the AI supports for what they do. Thank you so much, Ulrich. All right, let's focus on you now, Kate. Now, so we've just kind of come from what is possible, what's up in that opportunity space, to now really thinking about, okay, your work and your research is really on the ground. It's working with educators like what we just heard about in lots of different educational contexts. So Kate, I'm going to ask you, your research as it revolves around implementing AI tools and technologies in real schools. What are the earliest adopters of AI in education? Where are they? Who are they? What kinds of outcomes are they able to make possible? And what's the research beginning to tell us for what we need to be doing next?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that question, Ruth. I'll say that the early adopters are everywhere. You know, they're in New Mexico, they're in Florida, they're in Illinois, they're in Idaho, they're in New York. But one thing that they all have in common is support from their administration and their district. every teacher that I've interviewed about, how are you using AI? How are you advancing AI literacy? How are your students going from, 0 to 60 on understanding machine learning? And there's a wide variety of answers that a lot of it comes from the heart. A lot of it comes from teachers putting in extra hours. We've had teachers who just spoke about, the work that they're doing. I'm sure they're hitting the same incredible milestones as the teachers I've interviewed in terms of just engaging their students with AI. But I think all of these teachers are coming from a place where they've got support. If you are a teacher that has an administrator who's not supporting you on AI, whose superintendent or district leaders are not encouraging administrators to think deeply about security, privacy, confidentiality, data. If you're not coming in, maybe they don't have policies yet, but they're certainly thinking about how to do this well. If you're not doing that, then it doesn't get to teachers, and teachers are unsure of how to proceed. So you do have real go-getter teachers who are trying it out and doing it anyway. And I've brought a few stories from those teachers to share with you today. But I think, I'm really excited to be on this call because I think a lot of people in this room have real power to encourage teachers and let them know that we're thinking deeply, not just about artificial intelligence, but about some of the concerns that teachers have about, what's happening with student data, right? How are we making sure that these tools are something that we can communicate to our families about in a way that make our families feel safe using these tools? Right. And in the long term, what is it going to mean? Have we as a district thought about the long-term effects of shifting our curriculum or even our, data infrastructure over to using these tools regularly? Yeah. So I think that's really what's given teachers an edge is having that support.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that overview. So a big part of your role at MIT also includes teacher professional development and training. You and I get to work in that space together, which is so much fun. Can you fill in the task force on some takeaways from those sessions from the PD that you've been leading and designing with educators? What kinds of challenges do educators report around working with AI when they start leveraging curriculum like AI every day into the classroom?
Yeah, so the curriculum is called the daily curriculum. It's called the Developing AI Literacy Curriculum. It's designed for middle schoolers, but we also have done a lot of work to develop it for high schoolers as well. And the teacher professional development program is called Everyday AI. And the model is that you acknowledge that teachers are really busy, that it's hard to find the time to learn about this new emerging technology. And that teachers need not just content knowledge, but pedagogical content knowledge, right? They need to practice teaching how the mechanisms of artificial intelligence, the algorithmic structures actually work, right? So even underneath that is this understanding that, or this belief that it's not just about learning how the AI tools work, it's about learning about how AI works so that your students are not dependent on any one particular tool, that they have the reasoning, the critical thinking, and the informed decision-making power to work with any tool because they have a literacy and an understanding of what these algorithms are doing under the hood. So that's sort of the philosophy underneath these initiatives I'm describing. And the model that we have is 2 parts, and I'll even say it's a 3rd part. So the first part is a book club. We meet once a week and we read in between meetings about artificial intelligence. Sometimes we watch a video together. Sometimes there's a reading, but it's that weekly gathering where we're coming together and we're talking about a particular concept. That's been very powerful in terms of just getting teachers to a point where they know next to nothing about how artificial intelligence works, to feeling they can talk about it with colleagues in a way where they feel confident in some of the knowledge they have about what's under the hood. Then we do a practicum. And the practicum is an experience where teachers are actually in like a summer camp-like setting where they're working with real students and they're practicing implementing the daily curriculum, or it could be any curriculum. But the heart that we've learned from that experience is that it's one kind of knowledge to know, right? And it's another kind of knowledge to actually do. And the doing is so important, as we all know from just teacher professional development modeling, but also we've learned in the specific case of artificial intelligence that kids have these very amazing, rich encounters with AI that are actually pretty specific to AI, particularly in terms of how it can break or hallucinate or be biased. And so teachers, having been in that book club and talking with colleagues and learning about the curriculum, and then having an opportunity to practice handling and talking with students about what the AI tool is doing in terms of its output, its reliability, its accuracy, what it actually means. All those conversations require some nuance and some understanding of how these tools actually work. So having an opportunity to practice those conversations in a practicum setting, teachers have said is really helpful. And then the third part that I sort of tagged on at the end there is that in the everyday AI model, once teachers are finished with the training and they go back in their classrooms, we try to fight isolation, right? I think one of the greatest barriers to teachers in their classrooms, particularly teachers who are teaching artificial intelligence, but really any teacher, is isolation. You might, in a rural setting, you are the only teacher in your district teaching artificial intelligence right now. Maybe that's not the case for everybody because it's very popular, but certainly when we started doing this project in 2021, we were talking to teachers who were the only people in their building, some of the only people in their district who are teaching artificial intelligence. So because it's so isolating, connecting teachers to make sure that they are seeing each other, sharing their stories, and engaging in a community of practice throughout the school year through monthly meetings, we found has been very effective in giving teachers a chance to feel the confidence to try implementing some AI literacy curriculum and also feel like they are connected and motivated to keep up the work despite everything else that's going on in their packed day. Yeah, so thank you for that question, Ruth.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kate. And what I think is also so exciting is that, the way that we're thinking about how to incorporate these critical questions of AI and how to leverage AI in the classroom isn't content specific, right? Like it could be a science classroom, could be a math classroom. And we saw earlier in the in our session some examples across an interdisciplinary approach for how you integrate these kinds of leveraging of the tool, as well as how to be critical of what the tool is actually putting out. So we're raising critical thinkers here in these classrooms as we bring in more of these concepts of AI in the classroom. All right, so thank you so much, Ulrich and Kate. I would love to open it up now to any questions that the task force might have for our speakers. Nothing yet. Oh, Sam, why didn't you go for it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. This was really informative. I appreciated, all the panelists. Gave me a lot to think about. I worked in higher ed for about 10 years. Now I work for the AFL-CIO in a labor space. But I'm also a parent of 2 kids who have to take NWEAs 3 times a year. And I would love to see that go away. I know a lot of teachers would love to see those go away too. I'd be curious, are there conversations about how to replace those standardized tests with something that's more innovative, that can give a better real-time assessment of how students are doing without having to put that additional stress on them and on teachers too?
I'm happy to jump in first, Kate. I'm sure, and you, Ruth, have some additional thoughts. It's a great question. I'm totally with you. What can we do to leverage, AI for these resources? I mean, what AI is very good at is making predictions, and really what these assessments are giant predictions. So, there's both policy work to be done on this. So the U.S. Department of Education is now allowing a lot more latitude to states to innovate. So I think running with that, and then and happy to sort of speak to that, right? But that's sort of setting up at the state level ways to roll up the information so it is comparable across schools and districts. And then there are also then technical issues, right? Which is, how can you use assessments that are going to be reliable in each classroom, and then roll those up so there's just more data and information. So happy to share more of this offline, but this is something that AI should be able to solve, and it's using more of that classroom information and then rolling that up in some way.
Great. Kate, any response, or shall we go on to the next?
Just quickly add, thank you for that question or great answer. I just want to add that I think shifting away from those kinds of tests to more AI-driven tests requires an entire systems change, right? Because it's not just about making predictions about our students. We have to change the way we collect data about our students, right? And if we're doing that, then we really have to change the way that we get consent and talk to families, right? So there's a lot involved in using sort of predictive analytics to assess and evaluate our students. So I think we'd need some sort of systems change that would involve community work to make sure. And I think the idea of having this be something that's driven locally is a great idea. But I currently don't see the work, the investment being put into making that kind of massive system change that we would need to change the way we collect data about our students in a way that's ethical and safe and going to actually lead to meaningful predictions.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. Okay, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and share your question, please?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks so much to you both for your time. I guess my question is, when we look at our schools and education system, they are both aggregators of services, technology, and resources, as well as disseminators of information to students, families, and communities. So I guess I'm just kind of curious, trends that you see in how schools are aggregating or education systems are aggregating bulk procurement of subscriptions and or necessary technology, and also how they are disseminating and increasing parental, family, and community awareness around AI tools. I am glad to be Google Doc literate with my children in their use of the G Suite, and I find myself providing a fair amount of digital literacy skills to parents who are not necessarily familiar with the G Suite and how to use a shared drive and a collaborative working doc. So I'm wondering what trends you're seeing along that dissemination support from schools to communities.
I can answer that first, Ulrich, but I'm sure you have an answer as well. It'd be amazing. Yeah, so I've seen, I mean, everything's runs the gamut, right? We've seen open house nights that, you know, are one-touch opportunity for schools that are working on bringing AI literacy into the classrooms and AI educational tools in the classrooms to give parents a sense that this is happening. We've seen after school programs that parents come into, right? So there's these after school programs that are running AI activities, but then the parents have to come, right? Not everybody can make an after school activity. And then there's been some work that's being done from the, how would I say this, sort of newsletter home, right? So it's been a soft touch in terms of communicating with families. And I personally would love to see more of it. I think that the pivotal work that needs to be done in this area is to bring families along with us, because I agree with you that the work that we do at home to advance early literacy and early digital literacy really gives our kids the edge. But if parents don't have access to AI literacy advancing materials, then they can't support that kind of education. So I really appreciate the question, but so far I've just seen these soft touch efforts that have been meaningful, but I think more can be done.
You know, in an effort to some degree spice up this task force, I'm going to disagree a little bit with Kate on this and kind of unpack that. And that is, you know, Andrew, you asked a good question, which is like just using, you know, Google is really like a user interface question. So if we use Google Maps, right, you need to know like when can you mute Google Maps, when do you need it to be pointing, you know, north or in your direction. But do you actually need to understand the underlying predictive algorithm, the machine learning that sits underneath that tries to figure out the most efficient way from like, you know, Portland, Maine to, you know, Boston? Like I actually would argue you don't really need to know that level of detail. And so, you know, thinking about this from a kind of classroom perspective, I think, you know, without question, students and teachers need to know basic kind of data science. You know, what are we talking about when we're using the word algorithm? But really, like to be top-notch proficient, I don't think that's important. What I do think is that states and districts have a role to kind of help people sort the wheat from the chaff. So I'm gonna also be honest that like I still, despite driving a car, not totally sure how a combustion engine works. Like I understand that there's gasoline and it goes on fire, but like I'm not an expert on it. But I really love that the EPA sort of says, here's your mile per gallon. There are reviews online. And so what I would say when I think about kind of teacher practice is there's a broad body of STEM knowledge that we really need to do more on. Full stop there. And then we need to do more to just help people understand if I'm teaching 8th grade English language arts, what are like the top 5 tools that I should use that, are going to be good in the classroom, that someone has studied for effectiveness, someone else has studied for bias. And I know that if I use those, there probably going to be some issues. It's sort of the Google Maps versus Waze type decision, right? And you might not be either into either of those apps, but these types of decisions you make more as like a user, and then allow experts to really go into what are very, very technical details to kind of figure out these issues of bias or other algorithmic type questions.
Thanks so much for those answers. Yeah, and Kate, do you want to do a quick response to that?
I would love to. I
Go
really
for
like
it.
you're spicing it up. That's great. I wanted to say that I really appreciate your point, Ulrich, because I do think the field of AI education is sort of maybe split between our 2 points, right? And in a good way, right? The question of, how much do we need to know as educators and kids, in K-12 settings to really have the literacy needed to navigate these as informed decision makers and critical thinkers. And I think I just want to offer that, kids have questions when the AI tutor they're working with generates a different summer reading list for them than it does for the kid sitting next to them, right? And teachers need to understand a little bit about why those summer reading lists are different. Or let's say that you ask ChatGPT to write a poem about Christians, and it says, I'm sorry, I can't write a poem about that group. But then you ask it to write a poem about Sikhs, and it does. Right? Then as a teacher, you need to be able to say, one of those answers is hard-coded by a human who thought of Christians as a protected class, and then the programmer didn't even think to hard code to protect against Sikhs because of their own personal bias as a programmer. Right? So what I'm talking, and another example is if you ask your students, you can do this now. If you go into, I think ChatGPT will do this still. If you ask it to generate a list of 10 male surnames, you'll notice that almost all of those names are white male names or like Western European names, right? And your kids are going to ask, why aren't names like mine on that list? So I totally agree with you. You don't have to understand the math of the algorithms to help your students understand how these tools work, but you do need to have enough knowledge about how these tools can become biased through their data, through the people who are designing and programming these, to the people who've decided that this level of accuracy is good enough. There needs to be that level of understanding so teachers can talk to their students about what is normal, right? What is ethical? And if we have these interactions, I think teachers just before were describing this, like we now can be much more efficient with our tools. We can have personalized tutors where our generative AI tutors are working one-on-one and giving rapid feedback to our kids. We as teachers can't see the feedback that our kids are getting, right? And can you imagine what kind of norms these tools might be setting for our young women or our young men who are trying to figure out who they are or how they fit in the world? So I just offer that because I think the technology is still evolving. I think we're still learning how these tools work and what kind of advice, intimate, very rapid, ubiquitous advice these tools are giving our young learners. And I do think it behooves us to understand a little bit of how they work, just enough so that we can help handle hot moments where kids are like, why is it saying this to me? This makes me feel like I have these strong feelings about life and society. So I do think it's important to understand enough about how it works so you can talk to your kids and advance their social emotional learning and their sense of identity.
Yeah, excellent points, Kate. So really making sure that we're understanding that the dangers and the potential biases so that educators can communicate that well. Thank you so much for that. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. So I'm going to hand it to you, Lisa.
Great. Thank you. Hear me okay? Yeah. So, so I'm a physician, and just thinking of all the parallels between healthcare and education, I think have always been striking to me. I'm curious about sort of the going to scale. So you have to, or you are thinking about how to bring this sort of education to many teachers, not just one school, and they to many students and to their parents, just similar to healthcare and many clinicians and many patients. And I'm just wondering if you've seen best practice examples or good ideas about this sort of bringing the education and support to scale, whether that's from states or other types of organizations. I hate the thought that everybody's got to figure it out one at a time, whether it's every school or every clinic. Very point.
Kate, Ulrich, either one of you want to try for that one first? Kate, go for it.
I'll be brief. We're still working on scale, but I have seen some really nice ways that there's been a differentiation of access to the information, right? There's been massive online open courses that are available for free that you can get through MIT's PK-12 initiative. There's the Day of AI, which is sort of like Hour of Code, where you can sort of spend maybe just one class period to explore this new topic. And then there are these deep dives like Everyday AI and the daily curriculum, where you can really commit and integrate some of this content into your regular classroom experience. So I do see scale being something that has these different tiers of access and support. I think the one last thing I'll add to scale is that the theory that I'm most comfortable promoting for scale is hubs, connecting institutions, connecting schools with each other, so that we have ways of communicating what we're learning and noticing. Because I think with emerging technology that sort of arrived in our social space and hasn't sort of evolved with our social space, but just sort of arrived, we really need to make sure we're sharing what we're noticing and learning as quickly as we can. So I think whatever we do, we shouldn't do it alone, go together, connected. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I think Kate makes some really great points. I guess I'd sort of differentiate a little bit, right? Which is, I think what Kate is talking about really thoughtfully is how do we teach people kind of AI basics? If they're interacting with a chatbot, what are those types of things that they should know around bias or basic kind of STEM type issues? And there I think we have a lot of evidence on like what effective teaching and learning looks like. We know that more active types of learning, generally is more effective. So I think that's, one kind of issue here. And then, the other issue of scale, right, is that AI is just going to be more and more embedded into many of the tools that we use. I don't know if, live transcript is on this Zoom right now, but, great use of AI for many people. And so, how are we then thinking about these scaled products, what lies, behind them? And then, how can we think about making sure that people are aware of what's embedded in the technologies that they're using, whether it's issues of privacy or bias or otherwise.
Thank you so much, Ulrich and Kate. A wonderful panel. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts and ideas and potentials for what's coming down the pike. And I guess I'll pass over now to you, Mary. Thank you so much for the time, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth, Kate, and Ulrich. It's been super, super valuable to hear your comments, certainly complex questions, and really great to have a spiced up discussion. We're due to take a 5-minute break, and I think it would be okay to return at 1:18. I'm going to make an executive decision that we get 5 minutes and come back exactly at 1:18. So feel free to turn your cameras off and step away, and really join us again after the break.
think we will get started here shortly again. If folks could rejoin us.
Thank you. Yeah, as we get this going again, I just want to say those two presentations I think are hard acts to follow. They were very engaging, very thoughtful, in the expert category. Really good food for thought. And what I want to do, or what we hope to do, is now transition those conversations into our own conversations. And we'll have about 45 minutes for that kind of a discussion. I think two areas. One is what really stood out to you mostly today from what you heard from those speakers, and how does that align with your observations on how AI is beginning to shape classrooms and educational institutions in Maine? Now, we do then want to try and reflect back and ask if we're asking the right questions in our subgroup topic. And we're going to kick this off. I'm going to ask Ryan Lowe to give us some of his thoughts, and then we'll go to the broader group. But I do want to say that I think we heard within those AI conversations kind of three contextual areas for how we can think about AI. The first is, how are we integrating AI into teaching and learning? And we heard a lot about that in that first panel group. And those are conversations around teaching and learning. They're around conversations around improving learning outcomes. I think we also heard some information on how we might want to use AI to help us become better, more efficient educators. Can AI help teachers and faculty spend less time in administration, prep, and evaluation so that they can spend more time in that classroom student-facing orientation and be more present for our students? And then the final is, AI is clearly changing the workplace. That's only going to continue, and it's going to accelerate. And how are we preparing students for an AI-enabled workplace? So those are questions that I think we really kind of want to think about in terms of how we channel and think about it. Ryan Lowe from the University of Maine has done actually a substantial amount of work within the university using AI to help make both Ryan himself and the organization more efficient. Ryan, if you'd kick us off with some of your thoughts, we will then open to the broader group.
Yeah, I love it, and really appreciate the opportunity. I loved everything about today. Great job pulling those panels together. I mean, the couple of things that I really love that I think translate over to a lot of the things that we are trying to do at the university system. I love the reference to using AI like it's a strategic partner, like it's a thought partner, like it's a brainstorming tool, and not that it's an oracle where you go to and you ask a single question and you walk away. All of the work that we have done, the good things that have come out of AI have all been a product of detailed prompts and context and going back and forth, and again that partner mentality. So I love that. Love the use cases. Those of you that have heard me babble on and on about AI, what gets me really excited is when I identify that use case and I see that same light bulb go off with other people. As I've said before, some of the early stuff didn't really excite me, but the first time I found something that could save me 2 minutes, that was a big deal, and that kind of started down this road. So I love the specific use cases that they talked about today. I love the idea of getting out and talk to people about that and get them excited. And then the piece that's really, I think, really relevant to what we're doing at the University of Maine system, especially in this year, is we've gone all in on the demo side of it. And so you heard a lot of that today in the two panels talking about testing tools and so on. And so we made a decision, the board made a decision a year ago that we were going to invest as a system $500,000 in AI in fiscal year 25. We put 350,000 of it directly out to our campuses to allow them to experiment with faculty and staff and licenses and demos and all of those pieces. And then we have 150,000 that we have used internally for a number of administrative pilots. testing every tool that we can, testing different agents, and happy to have offline conversations, but I can assure you the 150,000 that we've set aside has paid for itself 3 times over already in less than a year. So we couldn't be more all into this space on the administrative side. On the academic side, we're deliberate. We're like the conversations you heard today. There are leaders in that space. Our chief academic officers, our faculty are leading that. But it's at a slightly different pace, I would say, than we're jumping into on the administrative side. So I'll stop there, Dave, and happy to answer any questions.
Any other thoughts from other committee members? Ryan and the university have obviously given this a lot of thought. We're giving it a lot of thought, similar areas. And again, we're channeling our thoughts in the three the 3 pillars that I mentioned earlier. So any other thoughts? You can put up your little virtual hand if you've got a thought that you'd like us to consider. I'd also, just to get us going, I know Justin Carey with Drummond Woodsum has done some work in the governance area, helping school districts develop policies. And I wonder, after everything we've heard, if you've got any information that you'd like to share with us to help shape the policy development, whether it's in higher ed, K-12, or any place in the educational arena.
I think Justin has stepped away, but I did just see a hand up from Commissioner Macon.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, hey, Dave. I mean, I know you'll want to hear more from Drummond Woodsum, but I know that Beth and her team at the department have created a policy and, essentially like a guidelines toolkit that was disseminated across the state to all of the schools that, show some best practices. None of it's a mandate. It's just a collection really that was created with input from educators and school leaders across the state. And what I was going to chime in on was just quickly to address a previous question during the panel related to assessment. I couldn't agree more. I think the assessment systems that we're required to require schools to engage in are uninspired and don't necessarily tell us what we think they're telling us. And they are currently a necessary evil where required by the federal government to do those statewide assessments, the NWEA, for example. But we did hear, if you think back to that first panel group, both Kate, and I forget the other lady's name, but they both were using AI as kind of a teaching assistant that was providing feedback to students in real time. And when you think about assessment, there's assessment for learning, and that's what that is. That's when a student is in the middle of doing a project or an assignment and they're attempting something and they need a little guidance, just enough guidance, just in time. That's assessment. It's not the kind of assessment that we call, the accountability version, where we can put a stamp on it and say, this is where you're getting your money's worth from your school program. However, it's the most meaningful and real type of assessment. And I think over a short period of time, I don't think it's going to take very long, we'll see that AI is going to assist us in transforming the very bulky, cumbersome, terrible assessment system that we're required to implement in order to receive federal funding. And I think AI is going to streamline that pretty quickly.
And following up on that assessment notion, I've heard feedback from faculty who have AI-enabled tools that help support assessment, that it also helps really inform faculty members on the strengths and weaknesses of some classroom preparations, and occasionally some biases as they get information back from what is a more objective sort of relationship. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's amazing. Isn't that great? And how quickly this is happening. But yes, it's happening K-12. It's great to know it's happening, I'm sure, in all the higher eds, that this is having AI as a way in which we look at ourselves and our practice and have things reflected back to us in, a more objective or a different, an immediate way. And I think it's great. I think, everything I hear today was inspiring and awesome. And I think one thing that I would like to mention is sort of non sequitur but important. In the work of pre-K through 12 education, we've always looked at technology since the inception of MLTI as being integral and just it's a way of doing it. It's not the extra thing. It's not like there's an AI initiative, rather, it's the integration of a tool like AI as part of the seamless flow of instruction and not an add-on, not a thing where we're phasing something up or ramping it up or adding things. It's more about helping people to, be critical thinkers, make sure that they're looking with, an ethical lens and with an innovative and hopeful lens, while also, taking the care to avoid as many risks as are possible in a fast, dynamic situation.
Excellent. Other thoughts? I think Warren is listening in, and Warren and I have talked, and I know Warren is doing a lot of work in looking at workforce initiatives and how companies are investing in their people as a way of improving corporate outcomes and therefore improving really bottom line results and in return to investors. And of course, this is an avenue where educators are going to be asked to support people who are already in the workforce. A lot of our conversation is shaped around sort of the preparatory workforce, K-12, community colleges, and the university. Warren, if you're there, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how AI may impact really the workplace and how it impacts employers who are preparing their workforce for an AI-enabled environment. Well, I'm striking out here. Warren may have stepped away. He is still engaged, but he does have his camera off and may have had to step away. So now I'm just gonna open the door and ask for anybody who wants to sort of join in and participate in the conversation.
David, I was just gonna, I can't opine on what you asked Warren necessarily, although I think my question or comment is in the same realm. And I think, Pender touched on this a little bit. I was thinking, obviously, the overlap between the education group and sort of thinking about the future economy and workforce, there's just a lot of overlaps here. And I think, Pender talked about sort of other skills that might be more important for students to learn in the future, because the future workforce will be different in this world, or at least that's how we're starting to envision what AI may mean to the workforce. So I think this, like, what new skills should be taught is just a really important thing. Both, I think there are, hard and soft skills. I mean, I think we're going to be living in a world where, making things, building things, trades are going to be, that's really important. We need a lot more of that in Maine. And, I'm not, again, an expert in all things AI, but those jobs will still be very needed for quite a long time. But also the sort of skills of decision making are probably going to be even more important. I was talking to a robotics teacher in Portland a couple weeks ago, and he was just sort of talking about how some students have already started to make sort of a, they're starting to sort of disregard some of the things that their teachers need telling them that they need to be good at, writing, for example. I mean, and I think we're going to have to grapple with, well, AI is pretty good at writing. I don't agree. And I think this teacher was still trying to convince his students, you still need to understand what good writing is and to make a decision about, did ChatGPT do a good job writing that thing for you? But I do think it's not going to be that long where students sort of have a different feeling about what's important when they see what can be generated for them versus what their role is going to be in education. So it's a pretty rapidly changing arena, but I do think the sort of skills question of sort of what I think the educators did a good job kind of laying it out, but I think contemplating what the world will look like in 5 years in classroom is it's interesting. I've got 2 middle school students who think about the world in very different ways. One of them loves all things technology. The other one still really does love reading books and doesn't love it. So I think our students are going to, I think, have a different vantage point on how important some of the skills they're currently learning are going to be to their lives.
I really value that point, Hannah, and I think that an important thing that we as educators have to keep in mind is we need to meet students where they are and move them along. And I really appreciated the example from the first panel where they had sort of 4 different groups and then assessed that the best group was the group that, if I remember this correctly, it was the group that originated the paper and then used AI to sort of support and refine. And so there you're integrating both, but you're making sure that that individual student is really learning. And then those students are learning from themselves. They're influencing themselves as opposed to sort of being confronted. Representative Sarah and Commissioner Macon, I see that you've got your hands up, and as does Deanne. I'm going to go in order here unless there's sort of a continuation of the flow. But Dan, you had your hand up shortly after Director Pingree did. So I'm going to go with you next.
I assume that's me.
Yes.
There are 2 Dans with hands up. Hello, Dan.
Oh,
yeah,
you're right.
But
Yeah.
anyway, thank you very much. Great panels. Congrats to those who put them together. In thinking about what we heard in the first, building off of something that Commissioner Pingree just said, was it's important to think about the skills that are taught. It's also important to think about the behaviors that are modeled by educators. And as we're thinking about educating the educators to educate the students, I noted in the first panel, someone asked the question, are you outliers? And they all said yes. So I think the challenge is getting this knowledge, experience, and implementation from the cutting edge to the fat part of the blade. And in that first panel, people identified the need of professional development. And what I picked up from the second panel was that fortunately that professional development doesn't necessarily need to be built. The curriculum doesn't need to be built. We heard from people who have resources in that area, but we do need to roll out the access to it. And while we have Commissioner Macon on the line and just coincidentally following me with her hand, I'd be curious to hear what others heard from these 2 panels about what we might want to do to roll out that PD so that we get this skill and knowledge from the cutting edge to the fat part of the blade.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll respond to that, but then I also did have a comment on what we need to be teaching the students. But how do we make the professional learning available and ubiquitous for educators across the state? That's always been a question. What's been great thus far is, I know that at least I can speak from the department's angle. We have provided more than 100 professional learning sessions just in the past few months. I think since they rolled out that guidance, obviously that isn't hitting everybody, but what is exciting and what will, I think, engage educators, they're busy. And while people might be very interested in AI, they have to prioritize their time and there's a lot being asked of them. We work really hard at the department and have had great luck in terms of getting people engaged in anything we're trying to foster in the field in a state that's very local control. So we're not mandating stuff, but we're saying, hey, we heavily suggest that you avail yourself here of these opportunities. We lean heavily on cohorts of peer-to-peer education. So educators who are distinguishing themselves as leaders in the field, like the ones you just heard from today, when they are able to be working directly with their colleagues and kind of building a coalition there, or these cohorts. And that's one approach we've taken that's been incredibly helpful, the train the trainer model, so that educators are sharing their practice with their colleagues and they have that street cred. But I just wanted to briefly put a pitch in there that over last spring and summer, the Department of Education worked with an independent agency to pull together stakeholders who care about education statewide. And these were community members, business leaders, innovation leaders, policymakers, educators, and et cetera, to say, what is this changing landscape for careers? What are kids going to really need to know? And I was going to respond to what Hannah was saying earlier, like, is writing even still important? Well, what we did here is in this world of AI kind of encroaching and maybe exploding what can be happening out there in the career fields, it's going to be extremely important that kids have an excellent command of language. They're going to need some of the most uniquely human skills, like envisioning something wonderful, envisioning an end user experience, then having the articulation skills and the command of language to input into these AI constructs and platforms with precision what they want to have happen. So language might be more important than it's ever been. And the other thing I wanted to say is I was reading an article about how everybody needs to learn how to use AI if you're going to use it as a writing assistant, dump a whole bunch of your own original writing into it so that you come out with products that reflect your actual voice, rather than in a competitive world where the majority of people are going to have a very generic voice over time when they're all leaning on AI to assist with their writing. But those who take the time to create their own pieces in their own writing style and in their own voice, and then feed that to the AI that's going to help them generate something, are going to have a huge competitive edge. So that's my plug for writing, Hannah. It's going to be important.
No, but it does make interesting points. We're going to see shifts in the accentuation of skills, not the elimination of skills, and some are going to become more important than others. So getting my Dan's right this time, Dan Nygren, you had your hand up, and
Thank you.
I'm just going to, ask you to go next.
Yeah, so I've loved this conversation, and being very frank, I'm not concerned about our kids. I'm not concerned about people in secondary education, because those folks, especially the children whose brains are still plastic and can adapt more quickly, I think as long as we expose them to these things, as the wonderful folks who've joined us earlier today are already doing, they will pick this stuff up. I'm more concerned about people who are already in our workforce and who don't necessarily have time or are inclined to avail themselves of educational opportunities. I'm more concerned about how they are going to get upskilled into these technologies, because, and this is my main point, the pace with which these things are coming is unlike, I think, anything we've seen before in our lifetime. And the degree with which roles are going to change and jobs are going to change is going to be dramatic. And so I think that's my important point is just that we've got to accelerate our ability to educate both our young learners, but as well as our older adults that are already in the workforce.
So, Dan, you work for maybe the largest employer in the state of Maine. Do you think employers have a responsibility to sort of lean into that and help support that learning experience?
100%. And so I know Chris Mallett is on the call. We've been having discussions with the RU about how we might do something together with them for our employees, but really all employers. I think, for one, we're looking internally at our own workforce and how we can, augment their capacity with some of the tools that we were talking about. And so we've got an obligation to educate them so that they can use these technologies to enhance their productivity, their effectiveness, and so on. But I know that others around the state are doing the same, and we've got to encourage that more broadly.
Yeah, thank you. Ruth, I know you're trying to get a word in. We'll get to Laura and Sachin in a minute, but do you have anything that you want to add to this conversation, the employer piece, or anything on the conversation? It's been so broad and so rich that it's kind of hard to just find one area to dig into.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic conversation. And I think just I wanted to kind of just provide a little bit of perspective in that one of our Maine Math and Science Alliance projects is actually doing research on asking the workforce, asking current employers and businesses what kinds of AI related and computer science related skills do they want their folks coming in with, or do they want to be hiring for? And then we're also researching and working with over 100 educators to ask them, all right, here's what we're hearing from workforce as far as what they're saying, the kinds of skills they'd like, which relate to critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, working with others, a lot of those soft skills that can be applied across the board, and then partnering that with what are the kinds of standards and practices that educators need to incorporate into what they do, no matter what the content area. So there's lots of really interesting work already happening across Maine to try to build those bridges between what's possible in the classroom, utilizing AI and other tools, and just utilizing the excellence of educators and kids, and what's happening within the workforce sector. So there's some really interesting bridges being built currently.
Yeah, there are. There really are. Commissioner Fortman, I think you were next.
Thank you, Dave. It's like Dan and I had planned our comments. So thank you so much for what you're saying, because in my head, I was like, what about the people who are already in the workforce? Because those are the folks that we work with at the Department of Labor all the time. And how do we make sure that not only they have the skills that they need so that they can thrive, but also how do the supervisors? So it's not just who are you bringing into the workforce and training the people who are there, but how are we training the folks who have to manage in this different environment? I mean, we've seen over the years, all of you have heard about how do you manage with multiple generations? I mean, this is one more thing that we need to be thinking about as we're helping people across all of those different generations in the workforce, and then get the skills as leaders and managers, and for our small businesses too, to provide the support that they need in order to take maximum advantage of these opportunities in the coming economy. So very exciting conversation. As I was listening to, I forget which presenter talked about, how do you do, they weren't talking about interviewing, but that's what I was hearing. How are you interviewing in this new world as well? So lots of things to think about. Thank you very much.
In the category of things to think about, I'm not going to put you on the spot for an answer here, but what I'd like to suggest is that we give some time offline, maybe come back at a later time, on how labor and education might work together to try and help support that existing workforce. Because I think Dan makes a very interesting and important point. We're sort of dealing at the tip of the funnel when we're talking about, the educational pipeline when they're coming out, and we've got 570,000 people who are in the workforce that also support. Sachin, you had your hand up, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Sachin, I'm the CTO at Vex, and I thought it's, Dan, what you started with, I just wanted to build on that with respect to the employees as part of the workforce, and just share the Vex experience that we underwent as we wanted to enable productivity. We wanted to enable this aspect of you have expert help available from AI for whatever job function you have. How do we navigate that journey? So in our journey, what we found is that we enable training programs for AI. We brought the best tools that were available from AI models in the company and made access available to everyone. But that really did not drive the flywheel of productivity, of learning, etc. And the insight was that AI is a contact sport. Unless there is some way in which engagement is highly encouraged by the people, it might be not necessarily some kind of a work expectation, but even it could be some fun activity, whatever it might be. But getting people to engage with AI tools so that they develop that personal insight and aha about what it could unlock, that is really, really important. And then the other aspect is we do need like a central group that is focusing on risks and safety, because bias and how the training has occurred, what data is being used, those things are very important. So there is some oversight there that's important. But the magic of productivity gets unlocked when someone who's deep into their functional area, like in sales and marketing, in finance, in customer service, in, let's say, technology in terms of software writing, etc., they understand their domain extremely well. That's what they have done for years. And then there's another group that is, let's say, the AI expert, and they understand the AI expertise and the AI tools and so on and so forth. I think both alone do not enable productivity, but once the functional expert is able to engage with the AI tools in a neutral setting, but then reimagine how work can be done. If they are encouraged to say, how would you propose sales and marketing can be done with AI? So I think those conversations then start to bring to the table what those opportunities are that then can get codified as programs for training, education, or some pilot programs leading to successes that can then be shared more broadly with all people in that function, etc. So that leads to a structured way in which that can be unlocked. That makes a lot of success taking that journey, but just starting with making it available and having even positive incentives didn't do it unless the engagement somehow was really made possible. Like that contact sport aspect of AI, that was a huge enabler. Just want to share that.
It's very interesting. Thank you. I'm going to transition for a minute here, but the more recent portion of this conversation causes me to wonder whether as things move fast, and this is going to start to move really fast, there is just sort of a natural flow, and there are populations of people who get left behind, the existing workforce, maybe older workers, maybe lower income workers. And as we transition to the question, are we asking the right questions? A question we may want to consider is, how do we make sure that we're supporting everyone in this AI journey as it changes work, as it changes education, as it changes workforce preparation? Are there any thoughts on the other questions? And Dan or Scott, I don't know if you want to put them back up just for a second, just to make sure that we're addressing the right questions for the education subgroup. Matt, thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Degler. I've been very quiet. This is my first meeting on the team, and folks will start to realize that I operate by the golden ratio, listen more than I speak. But I'd like to actually piggyback on what you just said, Mr. Degler, leaving nobody behind. I represent a very, very rural environment up here in north central Maine. And so one of the things that's kicking around my head is if my numbers are correct, 95% of our student base is enrolled in public school system and 5% in homeschooling, is if those numbers are correct, and not wanting to leave anybody behind. That's something that I would be interested in hearing feedback on, especially, and I've forgotten the brilliant lady's name, Miss Macon, when she was indicating that she doesn't direct the school systems to become early adopters, but she highly encourages them. I really gravitate to that, highly encouraging folks to get on board with this, because it is going to change the future for us. I guess I would just be interested at some point in hearing thoughts as to how we can make sure that this is really leveraged across all student bases.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I do think that's going to become increasingly important and increasingly challenging when the pace is moving so fast. All right. Any other thoughts? This has been a very rich conversation, driven, I think, by very rich and very thoughtful panelists during the first half of the presentation. So I think given us a lot to think about, and I think providing a really strong foundation for Chris and the education subgroup to really begin to reach in. Before we close up here, and I do have a couple of housekeeping notes that I'll want to attend to, just want to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to offer any thoughts that they may have. Chris, while we're talking about the education subgroup, do you just want to give people a quick update on where and when you're meeting and sort of your focal points? Chris Mallett.
I think that's actually me, Dave.
Yeah, that was. I think it's Ryan is actually leading that one. That was a holdover from last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My
All
fault.
right, Ryan.
Yeah, we meet Monday, 90, I think it's Monday. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. 90 minutes set aside. We're going to talk a little bit about the national landscape. There's obviously been a lot of these reports, some that have already been issued, some that are focused on education. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about some of the literature that's out there. We had an AI agent go do all that literature for us. And then we're just going to start diving into the three individual questions and have a good discussion and plan for future discussions.
Okay. And you're meeting Monday?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Molly?
Yeah, hi, thank you. This was a fantastic panel series, and I'm from a sort of ACLU perspective, I was particularly interested in hearing some specific instances of the way that discrimination, the way that bias can be a part of these systems. And so I'm wondering on number 5, both thinking about how Maine can monitor impacts and risks, but also how can Maine think about anticipating those dynamics and those issues and try to work within certain preferred either providers or provide front end suggestions about how to navigate things with an awareness of this. So we're not just monitoring, but we're also really more proactive about anticipating how some of these limitations and challenges may show up.
Excellent. Okay, last call for questions. I'll give us a very quick wrap up here. First of all, thank the panelists for, again, very engaging conversations, very rich. Our next meeting is going to be on June 4th from 2 to 4 o'clock, and the topic is going to be on healthcare. And the healthcare group is actually volunteering to have a meeting with a little bit of preparation time at Maine Health. Now, we'll provide a Zoom link, but I'm wondering whether Scott or Dan himself want to try and provide just a little bit more overview on the thoughts there so that people can come prepared. And then we'll move into the final, just sort of close up, wrap up here.
Thanks, President Degler. So as Mary mentioned up front, next month, Dan has generously offered to host this group for the task force meeting in person at Maine Health. We'll have a virtual option for those who can't be there. And then for task force members who are interested in seeing some technology being demoed before the meeting from 1 to 2, there'll be an opportunity to do a visit with Dan at the Maine Health team. So more information to come. We will be hitting your inboxes later this afternoon with details about that and a request that you let us know if you will be there in person or not. So we're really excited about that and look forward to seeing you in a few short weeks.
Okay. So keep your eye on your email over the next 24, 48 hours for more information on that. I think that's an exciting opportunity, A, for us to get together in person, B, for us to sort of experience how healthcare is putting AI to work, and it'll make everything tangible. With that, unless there is more from...
Can I just underscore one thing that Scott just mentioned, was mentioned earlier? So it's going to be an in-person demo from 1 to 2, and that can only be in person. I think Dan Nygren could speak to this, but it's just, the thought is it's a little too hard to see those demos remotely. So if people want to see the AI applications in healthcare directly, that needs to be in person for that first hour, 1 to 2, or whatever. I'm saying the time wrong. No, I am, right. 1 to 2. And then the regular meeting could be either you could attend in person or remotely, but just to emphasize the demo is in person.
Yeah, I
think I
really
said that.
appreciate that, Lisa, because that'll be important for people to plan. Okay, Scott, anything else for this group?
No, thank you, everybody.
I think you knocked it out of the park, so thank you again for your support.
Of course, have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.